Hey y'all. Welcome to
Yeah.
Cocktails and Crimes. I'm Nikki. And as y'all know, my beautiful co-host Elaine is not going to be with us for a couple of more shows due to her mom passing. But my wonderful friend Anne from Unexplained Realms offered to come in and give us and bless us with her presence. So thank you so much
Hello.
for being here with me tonight. I know that true crime is not exactly like y'all's thing, but if you get a chance, go
A
check
little
these
bit.
out. They are amazing.
Yeah, we do
And
a little bit
tonight's
of true crime.
cocktail, y'all have some really cool stuff though. Y'all do everything. I love it. It
Mhm.
makes me so excited. And it's really funny. You and I were talking, so you know the chaos that's ensuing right now in life. And so to all of our viewers, be prepared. This is going to be the most craziest show because I'm not at home. I'm not in my studio.
You
It's
have to
100
tell them.
billion
You
degrees.
you
Like
have to tell
it's
them the
so
kamikaze that is you right now. You have to.
Oh my God. So, the weather called for this, no lie. Tomorrow is supposed to be 107 degrees, right? So we're like, oh my God, we have this big house. It's really hot. The air conditioners aren't going to keep up. So we decided we're going to go camping. And so we're in our camper, right? We're burning up the power at the campground. But trying to set up today, I literally am not kidding. I've moved from like area to area. Like at one point, I was sitting on the floor in the kitchen with like the camera pointed down, and all you can see was the top of my head. It's just been one catastrophe after another. But let me tell you something. Normally, what we do over here is like I make a drink and I tell people how to make it. Well, this is a Georgia Firefly, and I already made it, and I'll tell you why. Because
Mm.
today's been hell. So, it's a Georgia Firefly, and the standard for it is 3 ounces of Tito's vodka, 3 ounces of sweet tea of your choice, homemade or store bought, and 3 ounces of a tart lemonade. Pour over the rocks, serve, and it literally is the most crisp summer drink that you could ever imagine. And it was extremely popular in the 80s, which is where we're going back to tonight.
Wow. What's in it? So it's just a lot of few different things or
It's just 3 ounces of Tito's vodka, 3 ounces of sweet tea, 3 ounces of lemonade, pour it on ice and go.
wow. I'll have to make one.
Yeah. They're amazing. They're so crisp. I normally
Mm.
put like a lemon wedge in mine to, spruce it up a little bit, but today we were basic. We're drinking out of the alcoholic cup. We don't care.
I need one of
Today's
those.
been a day. But you know what's crazy? This drink was super popular in the 80s, and my uncle was actually friends with the dad of the girl that we're going to talk about. And this was his favorite drink.
Oh wow. That's
So
cool.
it's kind of one of those, like, I feel like we bring that one in and like draw it all together. Um,
Mm.
but tonight we're going to be talking, we're going back to 1986, right? Crazy thing, because I love the 80s. You and I have talked about this.
Yes, me
Um,
too.
But we're gonna talk about Shondra May. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this girl. Obviously, it wasn't national news, and it happened in the 80s. But
Mm.
so imagine the fact that this is February in Mississippi, small town, unincorporated area. Now you're talking 1986. Like this was the time that being a teenager was magical, right? Brisk, cold February day, perfect weather, little rain. You know, small and like super small area. And this case literally stands to this day. Like you can mention it and you can still see the chill go through these. So
Right.
crazy. Uh, and like, of course, the 80s. Man, that was a time of like Trans Ams, big hair, and
Mm.
parachute pants. Best music and movies they have ever made.
Yes, yes,
Um,
that was the best time for music. And
then like you have
things were just simple, and I think that, like, as you get into this story, everyone's gonna notice, like, things were so simplistic back then, which is why this actually took place. And,
yeah,
basically, when we break it down, they'll see it really was a simple-minded time, and no one would have ever thought that danger would be, like, right around them.
exactly.
Yeah, so
Not only that, you're talking a simple amount of time in a small town. It's so weird.
mhm.
And I actually looked up the crime statistics for the area when this happened. They had never had a murder in this area in Pea
Wow.
Ridge, which is where this is. Um, so you're talking, back then cruising the parking lot with your friends, just the magical things that you do. And for Chandra May, who we're going to be talking about today, she's a senior in high school. But this wouldn't be the end of her young life. So February 4th, 1986 would be the last day that she's ever seen alive. And for Richard and Janelle May, her parents, it would be the start of the worst nightmare that these people would ever go through. It started on February 4th, 1986, and sadly to this day, their nightmare still doesn't have a closed chapter or an ending. And for any parent that loses a child, that would be hard. But to have your child kidnapped, missing for 22 days, and then your child's body to be found and dumped carelessly on a creek bank with no answers, it had to be as bad as it could possibly get. And that's exactly what
Mm.
Richard and Janelle have gone through. And this case is still open, it's unsolved, and it is literally gone as cold as that February day. Like, no answers. Um,
Right.
so this Shondra May was actually the daughter of Richard and Janelle May. She was the miracle baby to her parents, the
Mm.
baby sister to her brother Tim. Richard and Janelle were actually told that they would never actually have children naturally of their own. So
Mhm.
they adopted a baby boy and named him Tim. Well, exactly 8 months later to the day and 1 month early, Chandra makes her appearance into the world at 3 pounds, 10 ounces.
Isn't that the way it always happens though? Really?
It really is. So it
Like you
really
adopt a
was
kid and
their
then boom.
miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she really was their miracle. So
Mm.
Richard and Janelle raised their children in this unincorporated community called Pea Ridge, located off of Highway 35 in northern Scott County in Mississippi, near the southern border of Leake County, which is like 35, 40 miles from your central area of like the Jackson metro area.
Mhm.
Uh, Chandra attended a Leak Academy in Madden, Mississippi. She was a senior. And Leak Academy to say was small would be an understatement. Her entire graduating class was 36 her senior year.
Right. I heard
Like,
something or read something about the town being like a blink of an eye, like you would pass it if you weren't paying attention kind of thing,
you
like,
will.
yeah.
It's
Just
insane.
tiny.
I used to actually live only about 20 minutes from where this happened. And growing up,
Wow.
I didn't even know Pea
Mhm.
Ridge existed, and we drove through it all the time. So yeah, it's like there's not even a sign that says like welcome to.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but like she played piano at the local Calvary Baptist Church. She worked at McDonald's to have extra walking around and spending money. She was the small, super petite, little beautiful girl, and she was described by everybody that I've spoken with, and even past interviews that people have done. She was a light. She was her parents' miracle, and she never met a stranger. I mean, she just everybody that met her, she was their friend, and she, constantly was just wanting people to be happy and life of the
Mhm.
party, so to speak.
I read
And
that
so
she was described as, just a light, like a bright, shiny light, like, everyone just adored her. Mhm.
They no, like, no one anybody that you ask that remembers, it's like, "Oh, I knew her, I met her one time," and she made an impact on people, even just meeting them one time. And so, on Tuesday, February 4th, it was just like any other day for Chandra. She went to school, she did her normal routine, daily classes, and then she drives past her home in Pea Ridge to the town of Forest, which is located 13 miles to the south of where she lives. And she clocked into McDonald's in Forest at 6 p.m. Now, due to the weather being really, it's cold, it's rainy, traffic at McDonald's was extremely slow. So her manager cut her and a couple other employees early. Chandra clocks out at 7:24 p.m., but she waits around about 15 minutes in the lobby, hoping that maybe it'll pick up and she could clock back in before deciding to leave. Um, Of course, it didn't. So, since this was the time before cell phones and you couldn't just call and say, "Hey, I'm on the side of the road," or whatever. Chandra did what she did every night, and it had become a more even of a routine because she'd been feeling like she'd been being followed 6 months before. So, what would be classified as 4 nights before her abduction, four guys with long hair driving a large older model car handed the person that was working the drive-through a dead rose and told him to give it to Chandra. So now she's made this hardcore routine of calling her mom and saying, "Hey, She used the payphone in the lobby. She called her mom at exactly 7:40 p.m., said, "Mom, I'm off work." And she said, "I'm going to stop at TG&Y," which I don't know, like, if you guys know this, but we used to have these, like, stores that were dime stores.
Okay, I think
Everything
we
was, like,
just totally
nuts.
dated ourselves. I remember TGY.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there was one that was, like, right across
Mhm.
the street from McDonald's. Like, it was down and across the street. And so she says, "I'm going to stop there and then I'm headed home." So Chandra is seen at TG&Y. TG&Y. She purchased an oversized jumbo Valentine's Day card. Now you'll remember those massive, huge
Mm.
cards. She purchased one of those for her boyfriend Tony Adams, and the receipt was actually later found in her car, and that would confirm the purchase that the people said they saw, and that would be the last time that Chandra would actually be seen alive. Um, the parking lot of TG&Y, and you know this, we were young at one point. Um, in small towns, especially here, kids hang out in parking lots. And when people stopped letting them do that is when we started running into problems, right?
Right.
So TG&Y was like the local hangout. It had a big parking lot. The guys would drive their cars and flirt with the girls, and the girls would sit over in the corner and giggle.
Mm.
There's more hearts broken and more love found in a parking lot in the South than
Absolutely. Well,
anything in
I
the
think
world.
that's pretty typical of the '80s. I mean, I remember doing that in the
Oh,
'80s and the
yeah.
'90s. So,
Yeah,
on Friday nights, Saturday nights, everybody meets up in their car or whatever, and you're hanging out in a parking lot and flirting and whatever. So it's kind of a typical
exactly. And
teenage
no,
thing.
no one was hurting anything. No one was in trouble. You were just
Right.
having a good time with your friends.
Nowadays,
So
that's just not
that's,
even a thing, but yeah.
oh God,
So just
no. And
yeah.
so this would be a normal place for teenagers, especially girls her age, to go, right? But it's a school night, so there's no activity in the parking lot. There's no teenagers hanging out, cars coming through, no cruising Main Street. So Chandra gets her card and she goes. She's on her way home. Now, her dad, Richard May, this should be noted, was a towboat captain based out of New Orleans, Louisiana. He
Mm.
worked a 28-day on, 28-day off schedule, but he was actually in Memphis, Tennessee, in the Mississippi River working when Chandra went missing. So every night, Richard had a routine as well. He called home every single night to check on his family, especially Chandra's mom, Chanel, who was in extremely bad health. She was on dialysis just to keep her alive. Um, so he called home at 8:20 p.m., just like normal every night. And Janelle expressed concern that Chandra had not made it home yet. And that was very unlike her. That was very unusual. And Richard suggested to his wife that she go next door and ask his brother in law, Alton,
Mm.
who, you know, to ride the route, see if maybe Chandra's car's broken down. Maybe she's a flat tire, it's cold, maybe she's on the side of the road. So Janelle decides, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that. So she walks out the door and she sees Chandra's blue 1982 Isuzu I-Mark approximately 100 to 150 yards away from the house. This is what's crazy. So the engine is running, the interior lights on,
Mhm.
driver's side door is open slash ajar. The window's cracked, like rolled down and cracked. The radio's on, but the volume is turned all the way down. All of her belongings, purse, books, apron from work, coat, glasses, everything, all in the car. However, it's later discovered that her wallet is open and her driver's license is the only thing missing out of her car. All of
Okay,
her
so when do you wanna dissect that? Because that's the part of the story that just blows my mind.
they blows my mind.
Mhm.
Like
And there's only
this,
one thought that came to my mind,
I only
and
have one, and I think we
mhm,
have the same one. But
yep.
you tell me what your thought is.
She
Let's get
got
into
pulled
it.
over. She got pulled over by what she thought was the authorities, because
That's what I've
the
said.
engine's running, your door is open, and your only missing item is your driver's license. What do we do when we get pulled over? We
You pull
stop the
over, you
car.
turn your radio down, you roll your window down,
Mhm.
and you hit your
And
license.
I think back in the '80s or the '90s, I could be completely mistaken, but I believe it wasn't a necessary thing to turn your engine off. Nowadays, they make you turn your engine off. But at that
See, they
time,
don't here.
Okay, so
They
there's
don't care.
possibility her engine was running because
Yeah.
when an authority stops you, police officer, you just okay, you pull over, turn your radio down, roll the window. Oh, here's my license, sure. And back in the 80s, there may not have been a requirement for, excessive paper copies of your insurance and all that. Who
Oh,
knows?
no.
So
They would literally be like, "Let me see your license and maybe your registration."
right.
Maybe.
And if she was that close to home and didn't drive the distance and pull into her driveway, it's because number one, she was very young and she was terrified, like, oh crap, I'm gonna get in trouble.
I'm
I
getting
just
pulled
got pulled
over and I don't even know
over.
why.
I don't want my mom and dad to see it in the driveway. I did something really wrong. So of course I think that is my number one thought. That's what I believe
That's
100%.
that is absolutely where I went as soon as I read this.
Mhm.
But then here's what's even crazier. So there's no signs of a struggle outside of the car.
Right.
There's no forced entry into the vehicle. Now her cousin David, who lives next door as well, said he thought he saw Chandra's lights coming up the driveway, but he didn't remember seeing anyone behind her, which tells me my thought on that comment is you hit the blue lights on her before she turns because the driveway, I've actually been to
Mhm.
their house. So the driveway does like this circle thing. Like you pull up, there's house, and then there's Chandra's house, right? So Alton and them live here, and the driveway does this. So you have two entrances. Well, this entrance is never used, okay? She always goes and pulls this way and then goes out this way. So if he didn't see lights, well, there's trees on this side over here. You have blue lights on, you go to pull in behind her, you turn your lights off. She still thinks you're the police. That's why you would only see one set of headlights. That was smart thinking, but
Right.
it would logically make sense. So Janelle, her mom, hoping for just like a completely innocent explanation, calls Tony Adams, which is Chandra's boyfriend. He lives in Edinburgh, Mississippi, which is like 30 miles northeast of Pea Ridge, right? And Tony's like, no, ma'am. She's like, well, did you pick her up? Or, I mean, thinking of something logical or an innocent explanation. And Tony's, been at home all night. He hasn't talked to Chandra. He hasn't seen her. He obviously didn't pick her up. So Janelle's next call, obviously, to the police. And the site where her car was at was never treated as a crime scene. There was no attention to preserving footprints or tire tracks. This is a muddy dirt area, right? Car never dusted, never checked for fingerprints. Uh, but Tim, her brother, was allowed to move the car from where it was up to the house. So what anything that could have been in that crime scene then, well, guess what? Not now. You've contaminated everything. And then there are some reports that say, and I have actually gone digging and tried to find this, but there are some reports that say that the authorities said she's just a runaway,
I
she'll
read
come
that
back, which
too.
would explain
Mhm.
why they would allow the brother to move the car.
I read that too, but oh my god, that infuriated me. Like, are you serious? Like, she just got out of her running car and said, "Ooh, I'm gonna run away now." Yeah, that makes no sense.
Exactly. Like
Um,
that
but
makes zero logical
mm,
sense to me.
but I thought a lot of why the family moved the car was at the moment, you're in panic mode. You're in a small town. You don't think big like, "Oh my god,
And
somebody
I think
snatched
that that
her."
was really the case because that doesn't
Mhm.
happen. It doesn't happen here. It just doesn't.
Right. And
And
they're not
so,
considering DNA or evidence. They're just thinking, "Oh my god, where's Chandra? We gotta find her."
oh, let
That's
me
it.
move the car and save gas, because
Yeah, or let's get it
it's
out
an
of the road and
solution.
this is weird.
Exactly. And so then, of course, we have the authorities that some or half of them say, oh, she's a runaway, she'll come back. Which in the 80s, I looked at the statistics, kids like at her age were statistically 98% of them that went missing were just runaways that came back a couple days. Which I guess in the 80s you were bored, maybe. I don't
Yeah, maybe, yeah, I don't know.
Uh, but, and then there were other authorities that were on scene that determined she didn't leave on her own accord. This doesn't look right based on the scene, the way the car was. But they did make the family wait the 48 hours that was required at the time to file a missing persons report. So they still made the family wait, even though there were some of them that were like, hey guys, this doesn't look normal. Um, And so then this massive search starts, right? So initially it's just her family and law enforcement searching. And then this perimeter just keeps kind of getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So then civilians from the community start helping, and they're helping look for her. Students and teachers are, I mean, they're closing down Leak Academy and they're boots on the
Mhm.
ground and they're looking. And then the McDonald's owners of the franchise that she worked at, and then the local McDonald's, and it started spawning through the entire state. Um, Distributed missing person flyers, and
Right.
they placed one in every single bag that went out. So over 25,000 flyers were sent out across the state of Mississippi.
One of
And
the other
then
things
state,
that I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off,
oh, go ahead.
but one of the things that I saw was that, back to what we were saying, her running away, I read that her mother was suffering from complications due to diabetes and her
Yes,
kidneys were failing or something, dialysis. And so Chandra had literally taken on the role of a
the
caretaker with
caregiver.
her mother and I
Yeah,
think her siblings too, just really assisting. She was not someone I think what I read was I think I don't know, another YouTuber or somebody conspiracy theories were like, "Oh, she just got tired of helping everybody and ran away." She just
no.
wasn't that kind of kid though. She really wanted
No.
to take care of her mom and her siblings and
She
whatnot. So
she
yeah.
would actually, from what I gathered in the interviews and talking to people, I mean, she thrived on this. She
Mhm.
genuinely, and due to her
She did,
mom's
yeah.
health issues and those things, and assuming that role, one of her cousins who I actually did interview and I spoke to, and we're on the phone for almost 5 hours, but he said that
Wow.
even Chandra had made the decision her senior year that her goal was to actually go to nursing school, and she wanted to be a
I read
nurse
that.
and
I
she
think I read
wanted to
that.
take care of people. And so she would have never abandoned her mom if these were her goals.
Mhm.
I'm
No.
sorry. Never been like, oh, I'm done, and just like walk the fuck away from a running car.
Right. No, right. The whole thought of somebody just jumping out of the running car like, "Whoop, I'm done." Okay, I probably would do that maybe. I might do
Okay, I
I
probably
almost did
would.
it tonight, just saying. Anyway,
Facts.
I
And if
probably still
what
should, but anyway, the other thing
right. You can always jump and run here, you know.
right. The other thing I read back to her car, speaking of her car and the TG and Y stop, the card. They found the card, but they never was it or they found the receipt, but they never found the card. That's
Exactly.
what
And I'm gonna
they
tell
found the
you at the
receipt
end of
that she
this,
purchased it, but they never found the card. So that was kind
I'm
of
gonna
bizarre.
and I'm gonna drop a bombshell on you that was told to me.
Uh-oh.
And I'm gonna drop it on you at the end of this when I go through some of the key points that I want to make. I have a bombshell that you're gonna be
Ooh.
like, oh my God.
Okay, that wait.
So
Okay.
so then, the state police are stepping in now, and they're doing this
Mm.
aerial and ground search. And then there's a farmer out there with his own aircraft for crop dusting. And so he jumps in and he's assisting in the aerial search, right? This search spawned, like, it ended up spanning out into 3 counties. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the local counties around here, and if you look at a map of them, are actually pretty fucking massive. So they covered 3 counties looking for this girl, right?
Wow.
And, of course, like any other small town, it doesn't take long for whispers and rumors to reach the barflies, the Baptists, and the barber shops. Okay. It just doesn't. Um, and then the rumors like are just constantly flying saying that she was abducted by someone posing as a law enforcement officer. And then after her
Mm.
disappearance, authorities start getting numerous reports of a non-police vehicle with flashing blue lights attempting to pull over people on the exact highway that Chandra traveled every single day that she went home. So this is a story that was told by one of the coworkers, which is really crazy because now you have these rumors flying, just like you and I said. Window cracked,
Mm.
radio down, car running, driver's license is missing. Now you have these rumors that are going and they're saying, hey, it's either law enforcement or someone posing, right?
So, were those rumors or were there actual reports that people were being pulled over by
There were
false authorities?
actual
Okay.
Well, no, there were people attempting, but
Reporting it,
now,
right?
okay, Yeah. So here's what's
Mhm.
even crazier. Some of the reports, and actually one person that I spoke to that was like, please keep my name anonymous, and I will, like, I'll, always do. But they're like, no, let me tell you a story. And so they tell me a story about how this particular stretch of road, because it is so desolate, it is so dark. The only reason that people started getting suspicious that it wasn't actually law enforcement is that somebody actually pulled over on the side of Highway 35. And when they got out of the car and realized it was a male driver, they got back in their patrol car and drove off.
Hmm. Interesting.
And that was a story that was told to me. I can't confirm that that's true. I can confirm that the person who told me this is a very reliable person that I do know.
Right, right.
And this actually happened to someone in her family on Highway 35.
Mm.
So I can't say, like, oh, this is 100% take it to church.
Now,
But I can
I
tell
know.
you, I've done a
Mm.
lot of talking to these people, you know?
Mm. You remember back in the day, what is that TV show, Unsolved Mysteries? There was an episode when I
Girl,
was actually
Robert
doing a little bit
Stack.
of right.
Robert Stack
When
was gonna be my future husband, okay? Don't play with
ooh,
me.
we might have had to fight over that one. But anyway,
That man.
anyway, I was doing a little reading about this case when we talked about me coming on, and I stumbled across an episode that discussed your not necessarily her location, but that general area, maybe in a few states in proximity to it, that there were multiple cases of people being pulled over by fake law
Yes.
enforcement. Many statements, and most people were like probably mid 20s through their 40s, so they're experienced and they're
Yep.
like, something's not right. Now poor
This doesn't
Chandra
add up.
isn't right, but poor Chandra is not quite there yet with her experience in the world, and
Exactly.
says, oh oops, I got pulled over, my parents
I
are
got
going to kill
pulled
me.
over. But and the thing is like, I don't know, it's been about, I would say about 8 years ago or so. Personal story here. I was coming home. A friend of mine was the DD. It was New Year's. We had gone to a house party, like a big bonfire. And I'm not gonna lie, like, I'd had me quite a few. I wasn't driving. My best friend at the time drove us home. We're on a dead stretch now. Understand the house that I used to live in
Mm,
was like I said, only like 20, 30 minutes away from where this happened. Okay, so I lived on the border of Scott County. And fun fact, we were actually pulled over that night. And I told her when he hit the blue lights, I said, don't stop here because we're on I-20 and there's absolutely no street lights. There's nothing out here, right? And so I was like, don't pull over. I have this weird feeling, just don't stop. Just keep going. So he hits the blues and he's following us. And we take the exit to my town that we've lived in at the time.
mm,
And he's still blue lighting us until we turn into the truck stop parking lot where it's lit. And
mm.
when he turned his lights off and like flew past. And I literally saw the car
Wow.
and I was like, it's not a police car at all. And so I actually called a friend of mine who works for the local sheriff's department. And I was like, hey, this is what's going on. He's like, you're about the seventh person we've gotten a call from in the last 2 days. And so, yeah, like, I don't know what would have happened had we stopped that night. I don't know. I
Yeah,
do
I don't know
know
either,
that
but
it was obviously, like I said, this is not something that's unusual, and impersonating an officer isn't that hard to do. I can get online right now. I can go on Amazon. I can buy a set of wheeling lights. I can put them on top of my Camaro, and I
mm.
can be the police
Well,
today.
not only that, like, I don't know, I'm here in California, and I know that California does, like, heavy on the car auctions and whatnot, and they do
Oh God, yeah.
auction off the old, police vehicles, and
Oh,
people
we do here.
sometimes
But the thing
don't
is like,
always well,
and
they
if
don't
you're driving
always
here, they don't take the light off either, and they just
right.
all of us. We're slamming on brakes, thinking we're getting pulled over.
Exactly.
You know,
Well, especially at night, like, even I have to second glance, like, wait, is that actually a police vehicle? And sometimes they'll pass you and you're like, oh, that wasn't even. So imagine in the 80s, if somebody's got a vehicle that they salvaged, a police vehicle they salvaged in the 80s, made it look
well,
identical, and then
exactly.
possibly somebody is stalking people to try and, obviously do harm. And they come across poor Chandra. She's young. She's bound to stop for us.
Exactly. And not only
Mhm.
that, so one of her coworkers told, who asked to remain anonymous, that Chandra was actually concerned for quite a few weeks, like a while, that she was being followed. And
Mm.
she was never able to get a good look at the vehicle, but several other coworkers ended up coming forward later on and corroborated and said that they all knew that she was worried, but she didn't want to tell Richard and Janelle for fear they would make her quit her job. So she just was going to truck on, and whatever it was probably just like an innocent childhood crush, a teenage thing, threw it
Right,
into
yeah.
whatever. And so all of this is going on. Now the stories about Chandra was concerned that she was being followed. So then the rumors are just getting crazier. They're still going. Flyers are going out. Every bag that leaves the Golden Arches has Chandra's picture in it. The National Guard steps in. They start aiding and searching with civilians and Chandra's family. So then February 19th, 1986, Chandra's case was formally declared a kidnapping. 15 days after this child is missing, they upgraded to a kidnapping. The FBI
Wow.
then steps in and joins the case, and then the search for her,
Mhm.
for this girl who just vanished into thin air, has now been upgraded to a kidnapping. There's a $5,000 reward being offered. Tips are just flying in, but they're false leads. There's rumors. 22 days.
I'm
22 long and excruciating
I'm
days for this
I'm
family.
I wanna stop you there because I just wanna express my frustration. Um, b the not
Why did it
upgrading of the
take
case.
15 days?
Exactly. Can you imagine if it had been upgraded immediately and the FBI had stepped in, could we possibly have found her? Absolutely. Could we
I
have
believe
saved
so.
her? Yeah, but waiting for the FBI's presence after all that time, we I'm frustrated beyond belief. But again, times are different, Back then, things were not looked at the same way. If you and I suspected a stalker that we had a stalker now, we would act immediately now. But
Oh,
that's because we
absolutely.
we have so much information. We know it's a common thing constantly. Back in the 80s, you never why would you
I
that's
don't
not a
even think the
thing,
word
I
stalker
mean,
was a thing. You know,
right.
do you people were like, "Oh, that's just it goes back to the joke of, well, if the boy's mean to you in kindergarten, it's because he has a crush on you."
Exactly.
Stalkers were just like, "Oh, they just have a
Mhm.
crush, honey." And
Right.
that was especially here in the South, you know?
Mhm. I
And
mean, for
so you're
for for
talking
so many
15
years,
days.
people were
15 days.
mhm,
You've let
mhm.
this child be missing. You let this parent suffer, and you've come up with every excuse and said, "Oh, she was runaway. Oh, this. Oh God, maybe she was kidnapped." 15 days later. So then, 15 days, you upgrade it to a kidnapping. A few days after you upgrade it to a kidnapping, on Chandra's 18th birthday, an off-duty firefighter for Jackson is digging for worms on this fishing trip off the banks of Baker Lake, which is like 80 miles away, maybe 85, in Bolton, Mississippi, which is another unincorporated, small, very minute town. Okay.
Mhm.
And he notices something floating in the water. And it was later discovered after he called the authorities to retrieve this object from the creek, that object would later be identified as a body. Um, and it would later be identified as a girl wearing a class ring, which was used as to preliminarily make an ID, and then dental records later confirmed that it was actually Chandra's body. So this girl is found on her 18th birthday, dumped in another unincorporated, very rural, and it was off of Champion Hill Road. I know the area, and I drove out there just to confirm what I'm telling you. And even if you look at an aerial view of it, um, there's nothing. Like a suspicious vehicle out there would raise 700 red flags, and there's not 700 people.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
right.
so you would have to know this area to know, hey, you could dump a body over here. And when they retrieved her out of the water, she's wrapped in plastic, she's hogtied. But the bags, this is what's so crazy to me. They removed the bags from the body on the scene of the creek bank. So any evidence that could have been collected was immediately contaminated on the scene. Um, But later on, it was determined that her body was bound with like a fiber reinforced packaging tape, um, and wrapped in black plastic bags. But this packing tape is only commonly used in poultry raising
I
and
remember I saw that.
processing. So here's the deal. A lot of people don't know this that don't live here. Mississippi is one of like the chicken farming capitals. We have all the Sanderson Farm and Tyson processing plants and chicken farms and all these things. So that tape would be so easy to get a hold of. I mean, I could go ask my cousin right now who lives in Ellisville and be like, hey, I need some tape. And he's gonna give me tape that came out of a processing plant, and he doesn't work at a processing plant.
Mhm.
Like, I mean,
Yeah, I
I'm
get
not
it.
even kidding. Like, it literally takes nothing to get this stuff. So then they get into the autopsy. Um, the initial autopsy actually didn't conclusively determine the cause of death. So they asked for a second autopsy. And the second one determined that Shondra had been raped and had been struck on the left side of her head. It was also stated that the blow to her head did not cause a skull fracture. But then the second pathologist, both of the pathologists actually differed in their opinion of, you know, their findings and their opinion of the tape. One says it was applied one says it was applied post mortem. And then
Mm.
there was a large, massive tape mark, visible, like perfectly around her neck. And the second pathologist from Jackson, Dr. Rodrigo Galvez, who is amazing, deemed that the cause of death was actually the result of strangulation. Now, Thomas Bennett, who was the state medical examiner in February of 1986, seems to miss a lot of major findings if you look at his cases. So, Mr.
Mm.
Bennett, you should have done better.
Right.
Um, but neither autopsy could actually confirm or determine a time of death. And the reason that they gave was they were unaware of the length of time that the body had been exposed to the elements in the water. And one believed, so this is where it gets really weird. One of the autopsies claimed that, or believed that she was killed 5 to 10 days before the discovery of her body. So if that was true, then she would have been held alive for at least 12 days. But one report says that she could have lived 17 to 19 days after her abduction, and that her body could have been left in the water for 3 to 5. I don't think we're ever going to know the answer to that one, but
Mm.
there's also more speculation that both Dr. Rodrigo Galvez and Thomas Bennett both said that it is extremely possible that she had been exposed to some type of refrigeration. And if that is true, then the time that they assume, each one of them, she was alive would be completely wrong and be different or shorter than originally speculated by either one of them. Um, so up until this day, and I've actually been out there, her headstone, the date of her death is left blank. There's no actual date on it.
Wow. You would think they would come
So
up with something, you know? That's kind of,
that's to me
disrespectful
it
in a
was,
sense.
and the thing is like her parents have always said they didn't want to put a date because they don't want to say it was, she died the day that she was taken or she died the day of her birthday. No parent wants to pick that. And knowing back then, I mean, obviously technology isn't what it is now, but I would still think he would know something more. But if she was refrigerated, then I can see how you wouldn't. So there's so many factors that go into play in that.
Mhm.
But then, now we've gone from this isn't a missing person anymore. This is a murder. The reward for this rises up over $53,000. This is money that's being raised by the community. This is money from churches, from Leake and Scott County Sheriff's Department, friends. I mean, everybody. And they're
Mm.
they're just throwing money at this. Like, we're gonna put it in a pot and we're gonna keep on. So the exact amount at one point was like $53,014. And
Yeah, I think I read something about that amount keep going up and up, yeah.
Yes, they just kept putting I mean, you're talking people are putting their whole social security checks and like, help us find this little girl's killer. So you have
Crazy.
every parent and every young woman in this whole area completely on their heads. They're just in turmoil.
But,
So then the
I think, like,
McDonald's,
excuse me, I'm sorry. I think like what you and I always talk about when we've been talking about shows lately, these young people become everyone's child. They literally become everyone's child. That's everyone's daughter that went missing.
absolutely.
And so people are throwing their money in and their time and support because everyone wants their little girl home, you know? I mean, I think that's even
Exactly.
true to form nowadays when we see missing children and missing teens. We want them
Oh God,
to
I will sit and cry and I don't even know these babies, but they're my
me
baby.
do, right? We just want them home. So, but back then, because right now in our day and age, it's sad. It's just in your face. Abductions, trafficking, it's just in your
Oh my
face.
God. It's the
But
I think that before technology, it happened so much we just didn't
we
know.
just didn't know it. We just didn't see it. It wasn't in your face. I mean,
And
yeah,
now it's
literally.
just everything you see. It's like that the
Mhm.
show or the movie that what was it? Abducted in Plain Sight. Let me
Oh,
tell you
yeah.
something.
Yep.
Dude, you would have kidnapped my
Mhm.
kid like once. All right. And you would have gotten away with it. But here we are. Um,
Right. Yeah,
but yeah, so
that one was wild. I watched that one. Plain Sight,
it
yeah.
was it
Yeah,
was bad. I'm not
we
gonna
should do
lie.
it. We should do a whole show on dissecting that one because that one was wild, really wild.
It was.
Uh, just the parents. But again, I mean, that kind of falls in line with what we're talking about in this show. The mindset back there was just so simplistic. No one was thinking that someone was out to harm you. I mean, for crying out loud, everybody in their 80s is still sleeping with their doors unlocked, windows open. No one's
I
thinking
mean,
that someone's going to
girl,
steal
up
you.
until no, and here's what's crazy. Up until I would probably say like a year ago, I was the person that left my keys in my car, my purse in
Oh
my
my god.
car, my front door
Shoot, I live in
unlocked.
the Central
I slept
California.
with
We
my
can't do that.
girl,
No,
I live
Central
in
California.
BFE. And so
Listen, they'll
I
steal the
get
screens
it.
off your windows if they can.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No, I mean it's like so crazy different.
Yeah. But I think that's where the mindset was. But anyway, back to what we were saying. We digress here. Um
We do that. So but here's the even
Hi.
crazier. You want to talk about like you want to talk about even like, okay, so she's become everybody's child and all these different things. So then let's make it even crazier. The McDonald's franchise. Hold on just 2 seconds. I got to do this
Sure. Go
because
for it.
I almost dropped my mic in my lap. Y'all, I'm telling you, this is the craziest adventure I've been on in a
That's okay.
while.
It's just, hey, live
Um,
sometimes gets a little wild. So that's what it
I
is.
know. I'm making the best of it. I'm not even gonna lie. It's fun. I'm having a
We're not
good time.
editing, we're coming live to them, so it's what it is.
That's what I told him. I was like, I am here 100% live in the flesh.
Mm.
So anyways, talking about family and all that with McDonald's where Shondra works, the actual franchise owner himself comes out of pocket and he throws $5,000 and says, "You give me information on what happened to this little girl. $5,000." Um, so as all this is going on, then four people are given polygraph tests. Okay, in March of '86.
Mhm.
Here's what's crazy: two of them was her dad and her boyfriend.
I saw that. Really
Now,
sad.
daddy Daddy is 200 miles away when she's abducted.
Yeah, he wasn't even there. Wasn't even anywhere nearby.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Tony, her boyfriend, who was 30 miles away the night that she was abducted, had not left his home. So they passed flying colors, the whole 9 yards. Here's what's crazy, this is confirmed. The other two passed with deception, but they won't release the names of the other two.
I saw that and they were saying there was two of them, both failed basically.
Yeah.
But one of them was a larger suspect than the other, and I couldn't find any more information on it. I just couldn't
Oh, I
understand.
have information.
Come on, tell. Do tell.
So not only did two of them basically fail, but law enforcement was actually given polygraph tests. Now, here's where it gets a little crazy. They won't release the names publicly of who took these tests, right? Guess what? I have friends in low places. One of the ones that passed with deception happens to be someone that worked for the sheriff's department. But well, he didn't
Oh,
work for him. His family
wait,
worked for
I have to
them.
pause you for a moment. We have Mr. World Famous Jimmy Castle. He's butting in here in the comments. He wants to know if it's okay to have a boner while watching Cocktails and Crimes.
You know what? If it makes you feel that good, do it, baby.
Oh, and
Do
Grant
it.
has said Jimmy Castle is both are extremely beautiful. Well, of course, Nikki, we know that, right? No,
Come on now,
duh.
we do this. I love having the comments up here, but when my husband pops in, I know it's going to be something crazy. Y'all, Grant Gutter is my husband. Huge shout out. This man, I started doing this with a laptop and a Walmart microphone, and it's a pipe dream. And he is like, run for it, shoot for the moon.
You're doing
So huge shout out
awesome.
to that
So
guy. Um,
anyway, again, we digress. Where were we?
yeah. So I did some armchair sleuthing because that's
Oh,
what I
always
am.
fun. Yes.
And I made some phone calls, and I was told and confirmed that one of the people that passed with deception did. So one actually had family that worked for the sheriff's department, but he passed with deception. But however, I did manage to get my hands on a copy of his actual polygraph test. But here's what's
Ooh,
crazy. I don't believe this man has had anything to do with it, and I'll tell you why. Because it was later confirmed he has heart arrhythmia, y'all.
ooh, yeah,
So, I don't believe it was him,
that
but
might
the
not,
other
yeah.
one but the other one did work
Mm,
for the sheriff's department and did leave the sheriff's department, and there's no record of why, and he's no longer a police officer. However, he did frequent daily, every single day to McDonald's that Shondra worked, and he has a
hmm.
horrible reputation and a terrible family name, and it is a whole stink. But I still find it because some of the questions that they ask were like, I don't think that they were pertinent information to a murder case. They were more like, did you know
Mm,
her? Did you see her regular? Like, it's just stupid shit. But there
right,
was so the two that failed, this is where the polygraph thing kind of falls off. Two pass, two have deception. One, it's confirmed. You can't call it deception. The man has a heart problem that
right,
causes his
yeah.
heart to go up, down, and everywhere in between. So we can chalk it up. Not to mention the guy was like 60 years old. I don't really think that he was out here murdering 17-year-old girls, considering he's
I
like
don't
Santa
either.
Claus in the town.
Right,
So
yeah,
then,
no.
um, this is so crazy though. It's like a hush hush topic in the Scott County Sheriff's Department still to this day. So then these leads are still coming in. They're saying there's a man posing as a law enforcement officer attempting to stop people on the exact same stretch of road.
Mm,
Still, this ends up leading to a woman named Robin Parker having a fatal crash on Highway 35 just north of Forest days, like 4 days after Chandra's disappearance.
I read this,
Ask me where
yeah.
Robin works.
McDonald's?
Robin works at McDonald's with Chandra
Hmm,
and lives
interesting.
just outside of Harperville, Mississippi, which is only about 3 miles from where Chandra's car was actually found on Highway 35. So Robin
Hmm,
clocks out of McDonald's, same time, around the same time one night, is driving home, and all of a sudden she's driving at an extremely high rate of speed, which everybody said is completely uncommon for her. She was a super safe
right.
driver. And I think people were safer drivers in the 80s than what we are now.
I
Um,
think so, definitely, yeah. Um,
exactly. So she's on this straightaway, like just it is straight and flat, and she's run off like she runs off the road in a completely flat straightaway. However, there are skid marks that indicate that she was actually run off the road, not drove off willingly on this same
right.
road. So
Hmm,
you have this on top of all of that. So then here it goes. This whole one door closes, another opens kind of rings true sometimes, not all the time.
right.
Leads and names still coming in. This leads to multiple suspects, and they're all being investigated for the murder of Shondra. So even with the supposed suspects and investigations, talks are still going around in Scott County saying that there's a Scott County constable who
Mm,
has a word that will use a brother that will use the word challenged. That's the word, challenged.
mm,
That likes to sneak out in his patrol car and pull people over or hit the flashing lights on them. And it was
hmm.
reported multiple times on Highway 35. So
Really?
then that spawns the it's a cop or it's a cop's son or it's a cop's uncle or a cop's whatever.
Mhm.
And, this is just all over this small town. So then they start naming these suspects. And one is this suspect named Richard Weeks. This one to me doesn't set well. And I'll tell you afterwards why. But Richard Weeks, this man is incarcerated. And then a man named Kenneth William McLean. That one, that guy. So in August of 1992, Richard Weeks is incarcerated in a Missouri jail on forgery charges.
Right.
Forgery. Forgery is a long way from kidnapping and murder.
Yeah, that's
I,
big
he
difference.
wrote
It's
some
like
bad
a
fucking
what is that,
checks.
like a white collar crime or some nonsense? I don't know, something
Like
really
you
lame.
forged a bad check. You forged a bad
Right.
check, but we're gonna upgrade you to murder. That
It's
doesn't make
yeah,
sense to
it's
me.
like stealing a candy bar and then being called, grand larceny. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
So they bring him back for questioning in Chandra's case.
Mhm.
But they don't bring him to Scott County. They bring him to Hines County. What the fuck does Hines County have to do with any of this? Because Scott County is who has the investigation. Where she was from, where she was kidnapped. Why did you take him back to a county outside of Scott County? That doesn't make sense. But
Right.
Weeks actually did spend time in Scott County and Bolivar County in the jails in 87 and 88. But once again, they were also forgery charges. The man
Right,
liked to write
yeah.
bad checks.
That's
Um,
strange.
so they investigate, they question him. His name is never mentioned again. So then in March of 93, March 2nd, 1993 to be exact, Tuscaloosa, Alabama News did a story that talked about these potential ties of a suspect named Kenneth William McLean from Brandon, Mississippi. Now, Brandon is on the edge of Rankin and Scott County. Um, and he is charged in February of 93 for the murder of a woman named Lori Hill from Ellisville, Mississippi.
I remember this. Yes.
Lori is 18. She's pregnant at the time of her murder. McLean was said to
Mhm.
have stopped Hill while impersonating a law enforcement officer. Lori Hill was strangled and her body was dumped. At first, it was reported that Lori was actually dumped on a creek bank, but her sister has since confirmed that that's false. She was actually discovered in a field in Covington County outside of Collins, which is not far from Ellisville. So the
Mm.
charges against McLean for the murder of Lori were actually later dropped due to evidence or lack thereof. But the Tuscaloosa police are also in questioning with McLean for the murder of Chanda Feller, who's age 24. Chanda disappeared June the 10th, 1987, after leaving the Riverside swimming pool facility. Her car was still in the parking lot. It was discovered by police that her door was ajar, interior lights on, purse and wallet open on the passenger seat.
Mm.
Asked me the only thing missing then, her
What?
driver's license.
Oh,
Her
just
body,
like
her body
Chandra.
is right. So then her body is found 4 days later in the Blackwater River. And a
Hmm.
concrete brick was actually used to weigh her body down, but it didn't stop her. So obviously, you didn't understand decomp and swelling.
Well, yeah.
Um, but her wrists were bound with wire and her body was nude. So
Now
her
now
cause of death
Chandra's
was listed as drowning.
let's put them up against each other real quick, if you don't mind. Chandra's body was found so her
On
body
a
was
creek
found
bank
okay.
wrapped in plastic hogtie. But they
Okay,
never
and
could. So they determined hers was strangulation. They determined that Chanda's is her cause of death appears to be drowning.
mhm. So, similar, very similar in how they find bodies. So in 2 cases. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
very similar
very
and very
similar.
similar way you found the vehicles. So
Right.
in both May and Fellher's case, the evidence is botched, it's overlooked, or it's just plain out disregarded.
Mhm.
The
Right.
time that the bodies were exposed to the elements in the water, that already causes and poses problems in gathering critical evidence. But McLean was questioned in that case, but once again, never charged. So there's so many similarities between Shondra, Lori, and Shanda, but there's no hard evidence. March 3rd, 1993, the Scott County Times paper runs an article stating that a Hinds County teen had been abducted and sexually assaulted by a man impersonating a police officer on I-20 in Jackson.
Here we go
I-20
again,
runs
yep.
smooth through Brandon. The man was reported to be Kenneth William McLean, age 34, of Brandon, Mississippi, who was jailed February 25th. McLean had already been questioned twice in the Shondra May case. He was charged with kidnapping and sexual battery involving the Hinds County woman. Now,
Hmm.
later on, later on, reporters from the Clarion Ledger, a Jackson, Mississippi newspaper, actually attempted to interview McLean. As soon as the line of questioning went to Shondra May's case, he immediately ends the interview, declines to comment or answer anything else, and his attorney starts citing his Fifth and Sixth Amendment. Done.
Hmm.
Interview over.
Gee.
McLean, and to this day, everything that you find, McLean is still suspected as a high interest, but there's nothing but
Mhm.
circumstantial at best. So neither Feller or May's case could ever uphold a grand jury indictment, number one. Then two more cases with similarities occur. One in 2001, the murder of Mousy Box happens in Fortville, Mississippi, which is Scott County. His remains are found in Rankin County, which is where Brandon is, which is where Kenneth William McLean lives. Then there's the murder of Sidney Jones. Her remains are discovered in Morton, Mississippi, which is Scott County on the border of Rankin and Scott. And it's directly between Forest and Jackson.
Oh.
Details super minimal. I couldn't find hard anything on that at all. So during all of this, though, this case is just getting close. It's just getting colder and colder. Then there's a private investigator who's actually a good friend of mine. He's very well respected, um, who actually was willing to sit down with me, and we talked quite a bit about this particular case. This is
Mhm.
fucking wild.
Uh-oh,
So
okay.
this investigator hears about this case, takes a personal interest. And now back then he was new. Okay, he was cutting his teeth as a PI, and he was, young and like real high strung, but he had a talent and a gift for this, right?
Mhm.
So he asked me now, please not to disclose his name because of his profession. Now,
Well,
totally
obviously,
respectful
yeah,
of him,
yeah.
um, but he's still actually interested in this case, and he's still behind the scenes working. But he goes to the family, the May family, and he says, "I want to offer my services free of charge. I just want to, I want to help you find who took your child's life." Dad produces
Mm.
documentation. Scott County judge has put in a gag order on the Shondra May case. Who the fuck gag orders a murder? Who the
That's just
hell?
weird. That's very bizarre.
Yes, and there's documented paperwork that shows this gag order is issued. So it puts a blocker on a private investigator coming in or private pathologist coming in. This all has to run through county, state, whatever. There's this gag order on a murder investigation. It's the craziest shit I've ever
Oh,
heard.
that is just bizarre, yeah.
So then when I actually took an interest and started looking into this, I put up so many posts in forums and on blogs and social media sites. And it wasn't long, I got a hit. And it was one of Chandra's coworkers who had directly already written on a blog about Chandra and the workers and this case and her memories. And she was actually willing to speak about what she does remember and details that were told to the investigators when they came to McDonald's, or told by investigators when they came and questioned everyone, because they questioned all the employees at McDonald's. And she made so many multiple points, and she confirmed things that even I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get confirmation on this, but she would bring it up before I could ask a question. So I know, like, you didn't dream this up. I mean, if she did, she has a better
Right.
imagination.
Right,
Send her to
yeah.
Hollywood.
Right.
So
Mm.
she says, and I actually went and asked a couple of people, I wanted confirmation on this because I didn't know. But apparently it was super common in the 80s for boys to steal these blue lights from like the airports and things like that. And you can hook them to your battery and they would flash like a strobe, which would indeed look like a police light.
I think I remember that. I think
I
vaguely.
don't
I
remember
think I
that, but
do.
apparently
I do, like, in California, obviously, there's a lot more mischief going on around here, even in the 80s. People are just a little more wild. So I remember going to,
we're
like, a flea
we were
market or an open
out
air market and
in the 80s.
seeing those types of things. So, I'm sorry,
Girl, we
what was
were
that?
cow tipping in the 80s, okay? Like, we were doing
Mm.
nothing crazy. I
Right.
grew up I grew up in the time frame, or in the area where we stole train horns to put on our big jacked up yee-yee trucks. Yeah,
No,
it was good
okay.
times. It was good
Yeah,
times.
California has always been pretty wild, regardless of its era or time frame. I think now, obviously, where the world's just completely crazy, California is even more crazy. So, uh,
Oh, it is.
yeah,
Y'all are definitely, dealing with some crazy.
right.
So,
But,
but here's what's so now she confirms this. You say you remember that. I don't really
mhm,
remember it, but I'm not gonna discredit it because I've asked my dad. My dad remembers this time frame, you know?
right, yeah.
So she says, "Oh, well, everybody did it, so it's hard to say who or what." But then she says, I met Shonda on my very first day. I'm filling out my new hire paperwork, and she's like, I meet her, and she's just so sweet. But she notices all the guys are just enamored with Chandra.
She was a
Even
pretty girl.
the
Yeah.
the male manager, who's like this little wormy, skinny guy, big glasses, um, he's always hugging on her and flirting with her. And so I, of course, asked him, like, do you think? And she said, absolutely not. That man cried like a baby. He had an innocent
Aw,
childhood crush on her. So, of
poor
course,
guy.
she was like, and I don't think that man could have killed a fly. So
Mm.
there's that. Um,
I don't feel like it was anybody that was truly connected to her, like her coworker. What she was described as was like just this light and love, and everybody loved her. She was beautiful, and I think if anyone were really connected truly to her, they wouldn't have wanted to harm her. So it was
exactly.
somebody that was watching, possibly, like maybe enamored with her, like stalker type situation, but definitely not someone that actually was involved in her day-to-day life. So,
And see, that's what the coworker specified, because we get a little further into our conversation and she starts to divulge some details that actually kind of gave way for the reason for the rumors, the LEO rumors, to possibly actually be flying. And she said that the same cop came through the drive-through every single day. And she had
hmm.
two different names, and she couldn't actually remember which one it was. But she saw this man so much that she, to this day, all these 34 years later, 36 years later, remembers exactly what he drank. He got a medium Dr. Pepper every single day.
Hmm.
And she described him as chubby with dark hair. He wore glasses, and he wouldn't even give his order to anyone except for Chandra. So, like, he actually
Hmm.
backed up an entire drive-through line because Chandra was busy. They had to go get her and make her come to the window so that he would pull forward. Um, and Chandra would actually lean out the window, be nice, and give him his drink. And then when he would drive off, she'd just like roll her eyes and be like, "Oh my God, what a creep." That seems odd to me. you know? But then she also remembers this other guy from the job because her job was to mop the lobby and the bathrooms. And so she said this guy used to sit every day for hours in the lobby, just smoking cigarettes back to back and
Mm,
staring at ogling the girls that worked at McDonald's. And she describes this man as older, shoulder length gray hair, Sam Elliott mustache, but said the dude just gave her absolute like Reaper vibes. And she thinks that she remembers him driving maybe a white Monte Carlo. So we get deeper into our conversation. And before I could ask, she also indulges that one day one of the guys was working the drive through window and told Shondra, hey, someone left this for you. And he hands her a long, dried up, dead rose. And it has thorns on it. It's not store bought. Now, remember, we already mentioned that as to one of the reasons that Chandra was like feeling like maybe she's being followed or maybe she's being
mhm.
watched. And so the guy that works the window gives it to her, and she's like, I don't want that, and just throws it in the trash. She said, who left it? And nobody knew who these guys in this car with this mysterious rose were. And why would you go spay a dead rose? That's a little. I
Yeah,
think
that's
I'd give her a dead
bizarre.
rose. I would
I think
accept it.
a
A little weird, but
yeah, a dead rose, in my opinion, like to someone that's not in that way, like of gothic,
it's
it's a threat.
it's a
It's ominous.
yes.
It's meaningful. It's a negative. Like it means that you're wishing
That's
bad. You're
what I
not. Yeah.
said. That's what
So
I said. I
so
was like,
we
that's
have
really
a
weird.
comment, another comment from Jimmy Castle.
Jimmy,
He's saying all these murders are connected, and I tend to agree with that. I think so.
I think that they
Mhm.
are. I think they're all connected. But I'll tell you what I think. I don't believe that one person did this. I think there were multiple people.
I
I
wondered
think there
about
were
that
at least
too.
two.
Now,
I think there were
the
at least
80s
two.
the 80s brought us not only a lot of, fun TV shows and all that stuff, but they also brought us Satanic Panic. And
Oh,
at
and
the
see, one of the
time that
cases that I'm going to
Satanic
cover
Right,
is
but
probably
at the
all
time
based around it.
at the time Satanic Panic started occurring, everybody's like, "Oh, it's not really real, everybody's just panicking." But that led way to us not knowing whether the cults were real or if it was just us panicking. So people stopped really looking at those cults as like something real. So you could be very onto something there. I mean, maybe there was multiple people involved. It may not have been necessarily a cult or a satanic cult, but maybe something along the lines of just a group, like a gang, or hey, in the earliest forms of human trafficking. You never know. Very
Exactly.
well.
And here's the
So,
thing. So, coworker the coworker that I'm talking to says, "Oh, I used to love to go to TG&Y after, school or after work or
mhm.
before work, several days a week. I love to look at makeup and magazines and cassette tapes, all the things
Yeah.
teenage girls were into." But she remembers this particular day that, like, she said it just sticks so clearly in her mind. Um, she had a run in with three boys that always rode around the parking lot of the TG&Y, and they, try to pick up girls because that's what teenage boys did back then. Um, but they yelled at her and they were calling her sexy and hot stuff. And, she said they were just being really obnoxious. And she describes the driver as fat, redheaded, and he had a crew cut. The front passenger had kinky, curly, red, bushy hair, always wore a ball cap, and he had tattoos on his.
Mm.
Now, in the 80s, finger tattoos weren't common. Now it's a thing, but back then, finger tattoos in the
Yeah,
80s would have made
no.
you
That was
you didn't
more of
tell.
like either prison stuff or relative to gangs or cults. It's a
Yeah,
branding of yourself. Yeah. So,
yeah, you didn't
mm,
have finger tattoos. I could go get them now and nobody about it not. But in the 80s, if I got them, they'd be like, "Oh my God, she's going to hell," you know.
right,
So like
right.
it's a
Yeah.
thing. So she remembers these finger tattoos because his arm would be out the window and she could see them. So, and then she said there was a male in the back seat, and she said he had the most piercing blue eyes. He was kind of cute. He had black hair, but he seemed a lot younger than the other two. She said they drove this super loud red car, and she's like, I swear it was a Firebird. I know it was. Everybody remembers Smokey and the Bandit, and she knows
One of my
this
favorites.
car
Yeah.
was a Firebird.
Hmm.
But she says this one particular day, she's at TG&Y, they're yelling at her, they're making loops, whatever. And then the redheaded passenger, I guess, sees her. They're screaming at her, hey, hot stuff, blah, blah, blah. And then he jumps out of the car and he tries to pull her to him and pull her in the car. And so she pushes away and she gets away and she runs in TG&Y. She doesn't want to tell her family this because she wasn't going to get in trouble for spending her money or going, typical things teenagers would think of. But then Shondra goes missing and her dad makes her quit her job at McDonald's. And she's like, wasn't allowed to go anywhere alone again. So she said, I never saw these three boys again. I just know this is the run in I had, and I know this is what happened. I never saw him again. And she said she never saw the car again. So, but she heard from her friends, and I've actually done some digging to confirm this. The driver became a Pentecostal preacher months after Chandra's murder. And I did get confirmation that this man did drive a Firebird, and
So
he
wait a minute.
his
Go
name.
back. Go back.
Oh yeah,
I want to
yeah.
dissect this one. Who became a minister? Say that one more time for our listeners, your watchers
The
here.
driver of the car that tried to kidnap her in the TCNY parking lot became a
Mm,
Pentecostal preacher months after Chandra's murder.
interesting. Very interesting.
And then yeah, and I did dig up because she said, oh, I know his name was, or this name was this or whatever. And so I did some digging, and the person that she named um fits the description, and he indeed did become a Pentecostal preacher, and he did indeed own a red Firebird. And then the passenger, who actually have a name for him as well, um, went to prison with the finger tattoo guy. So he ends up going to prison for robbery and murder. He has since been released, and he resides in Lake, Mississippi, which is on the corner of Lake County. And then the pretty little blue-eyed boy in the back seat that she talked about has piercing blue eyes, and she just remembers his face. He actually ended up committing suicide after Chandra's death.
Wow. So
And
those two things in themselves, like the person becoming a priest, like obviously if you do that, um, you possibly escape any repercussions from a murder.
he became a Pentecostal preacher of all things. It takes
Right.
5 minutes. I can go online and get certified 5 minutes. Like, come on, dude.
Right. And then the other one, committing suicide. Hmm. Yeah.
Seems very
Guilt,
clear to me.
suspicion of, suspicious because, he can't live with himself, what he did, whatever,
Yeah. So
Um,
then we're taking another turn here. We're gonna take another twisty road.
oh, wow. Okay.
So the same coworker that I'm talking to, she said everyone who worked at McDonald's obviously was questioned by state and by the county, and then all of a sudden now the FBI is involved. So the FBI agent comes into question then. And she said, I expressed very strongly to the agent that she truly believed that the cop that came through every day was suspicious. He had something to do with it. He did it. And she said the investigator said that's highly unlikely. He never misses a day of work. But she said that the FBI agent did disclose and say something that chilled her completely to the bone. The cop told her that Chandra had been raped by more than one man. And he also followed that statement with at least one of her killers was redheaded.
Hmm.
That tells me DNA was harvested, but when or where? That's what I want
Yeah.
to know.
What year was that? That would be around same year. What
They were questioned. This was in '86 when they were questioned at McDonald's.
the
Um,
DNA though? I mean, well, because I mean, DNA was in its infancy at that time, so that's hard to
it was.
say that. Yeah.
It was. But she told the FBI agent about these three boys in the Firebird, and he
Mhm.
confirmed, and she told him that other women were harassed by them as well. And the FBI agent actually said that he knew that from other people that he had questioned that hung out in TGNY parking lot in this
Hmm.
case. And
Wow.
like I'm telling you, to me, like this case is literally it's like the plot to like a movie or like a best-selling
Right. It does.
murder
It
novel.
there's a lot of pieces that are seemingly connected. It's just
But
putting them
then
together in the right place.
Yes, it's like you gave me a puzzle with no corner pieces or edge pieces to work
Right.
with, and
So you don't
I
have a
have a box.
foundation there.
And, I know that, like, we sit here and we're telling the story, and it seems like we're telling the story of, like, you know, a novel that I read last week. And unfortunately, like, sadly for this is a real life. And this is a story,
Mm,
it's not false. It's not made up. You didn't write it as a movie. This is a vibrant young woman who had her life stolen from her, way too soon at the hands of a monster. Women and parents are living in fear. All these years later, Chandra's name sends chills down the spine of locals who are still alive that remember this.
mhm,
And, they watched it unfold.
mhm.
And there are more questions than answers, and they're not one step closer to a resolution than the police were in 1986. I've spent hours on the phone, calls, responding to emails, and reached out to people anonymously. And some of the things they chill me to the bone. Um, and then I got an anonymous actual message
Ooh,
randomly.
really? Mm.
And it was an anonymous, like, it was posted anonymously, the whole 9 yards, and it was to me on a forum.
Ooh,
And this
creepy.
woman said that she had been raped in 1985 and always wondered if her case was actually tied to Shonda's. And when she tried to report it, it's like she was silenced and told to go away. And then
Hmm.
multiple other women have come forward and speculated and thrown out this particular officer's name. Um, I don't honestly think that we're ever gonna know. And
Probably not, but you never know. I mean,
one day
um,
somebody will slip because secrets don't stay secrets forever. And unless you're the only one that knows the secret, someone out there knows something.
there's only 2
And
things.
I believe without a shadow of a doubt, I think that that one officer is involved in some way, but I think that there were at least three involved in
I
this
agree, but here's
because
what
they
I
were
think
raped.
you're completely onto something. My initial thought, with this story was, someone impersonated a law enforcement, or she believed she was getting pulled over by law enforcement. Nevertheless, she very well could have actually been pulled over by law enforcement, and it is not unheard of to see, law enforcement crime rings. I mean, you have dirty cops all over that are involved in all kinds
Oh
of
God,
things.
yeah.
So, I mean,
And
it's not as if he couldn't have, employed a few of his buddies like, "Hey, let's go snatch a bunch of women and have some fun, and then we'll just toss their bodies somewhere." So it's a very good possibility. Sexual
and,
deviance. Mhm.
and you know what though? Like, it wouldn't be so far off. And then, it goes back to, and here's the bombshell. So someone else reached out to me anonymously, and this is weird. You're talking about the card earlier on, and I told you I was going to throw you this weird loop.
Oh, yes,
I held
yes.
this one close to my chest because now I don't know if this is true. I can't confirm I wasn't there. But this woman who claimed to have dated one of the people that were mentioned in this found a box in her now ex, who was extremely abusive, and he was a sexual deviant when they were together. So she claims, I
Mm.
can't confirm, but she says, and I have the messages, so it's like a whole email between she and I. And I told her, I said, "Will you tell me your story in your words? Whatever, I'll tell your story for you." And she says that she dated this particular man whose name has been mentioned in this case. And he was a deviant. He was very abusive and sexually a sick, sadistic bastard, is her
Mhm.
words.
Wow.
However, she finds a box in the top of the closet in his house, and she finds five different driver's licenses and a jumbo Valentine's Day card with a TG&Y sticker on the back of it, and had no idea until
Oh.
recently because she just discovered Chandra's case a few years ago
Mm.
when the paranormal group that I worked with was
Mhm.
all over the news for going out and investigating. And she reached out and she said, "I don't know if he did it, but he's the type that would." And he has family who has land in Bolton, Mississippi.
Hmm. Now, he's affiliated with law enforcement though, right? He is?
He is. He
Oh,
is.
wow.
But he was also friends with a particular guy from the way she described it. they used to have like they'd get drunk and they'd run their mouth and be like, "You remember that one time we fucked these bitches up or
Oh,
whatever?"
yeah.
And
Yeah.
she's like, it was just it was boys talk back then, but the card situation, that was a detail that was kept
No.
close to the chest. But she described the card and she said it was like laying on a shelf, the bottom of the shelf in the closet, and it was like under this box, and it was a jumbo card. She described it, and it had a TGY sticker. Well, they used to put price tag stickers
Right,
on the
yeah, I remember.
back,
No, no,
and it just seems peculiar to me that this woman had details of 5 driver's
right.
license.
And I think that, like, a lot of people would probably wonder, well, if he took her, why did he take the card? And I feel like, I don't know, I could be wrong, but I feel
I
like,
think he was her stalker, and I
well,
think
yeah,
he messed with her, and I think he made and created in his mind, like, maybe a relationship, and he took the card because, "Oh, this is for
right.
me."
And that's what I was thinking, like, it's not gonna be for anyone else, it's only for me. And that's what stalkers do. I mean, I've had at least one stalker for real in life, and they build this world around like you and it's like a story, a dream tale.
Yeah,
So if he built this story about her and him, then of course he sees the card, and that very well may have been why he snatched her and murdered her. If he took the card and he's like, who the hell was this for? Don't you know I'm in love with you? Maybe he kept her, tortured her,
but
did
here
whatever to her for a few days because they said that
so
she was
we
kept
go
alive.
back. Yeah, and then go back to this. Remember when we started this and we're talking about the 4
Hmm.
guys in this car gave this rose at the window, but there's only
Right.
3 in the Firebird.
Hmm. Right.
Think
So,
about it.
mhm.
Think about it. That's 4. So then, it goes back to I'm not saying that like there were 4. I'm not gonna say there's 10. I'm not gonna say there's 1, but I'm just gonna say like it sounds and it looks very peculiar that these are particular facts that are being thrown out or things that are being thrown out. And we can't discredit anyone as any potential witness or whatever
Mm-mm.
because we don't know, we weren't there. And I don't know these people personally any more than you know them personally. But I
Right,
know that if
right.
we're posting this and they're saying it, there's a reason for it. And
Mhm.
maybe her abusive asshole ex didn't do this and he may have done it to somebody else. Or maybe she's
Maybe.
gonna lie on him and tell some fucked up stories. But she knew some of the details about certain things that make me think that maybe she could be telling the truth. And
Mhm.
I told you I was gonna take you on this weird ride, and this story is just
I
I,
f
it's
Yeah,
insanity.
it is, and
This
it's so
isn't a
horrible and
normal
sad.
thing.
Yeah.
And I'm
I
like, I
feel
told you
like
I was gonna
though
take you on an adventure.
right. Can I unbuckle now? I feel tossed around.
You've been on the roller coaster and
Yes.
now it's like, I would like to get off this ride, please,
I feel like
because
I'm
it is so
spinning. Yeah.
yes, and,
Um,
like, look, I've made so many questions in this case, and we've talked about so many of them, we've dissected so many of them, and, I'm pissed off. It took you 15 days to upgrade this baby's case
mhm.
to,
That yeah, that
kidnapping. That pisses me
I
off.
I feel like even though we totally understand why, I mean, in that time era, that time period would be unacceptable or unacceptable now. But back then you can understand why maybe they didn't escalate it. But it's still heartbreaking because in those 15 days, we know she was alive still at that point. She could have been
Well, and
saved, rescued, or
so
something, you know?
I thought about this, okay, follow me on this logic. So, talking about Bolton and where she was discovered on the creek bank where she was dumped, okay, and they talked about refrigeration and things like that. In the 80s, deep freezes were not a big thing
No,
unless you
not
were
really.
a hunter or
Mhm.
a farmer. That
Some people
area
had them, but it was
is
very rare. Yeah.
exactly. So how many hunting leases who had hunting property or farm property in that area that has ties to Scott County 85 miles away? That's a good thing to look
Mm.
at. They never did. Um, I still want to know, like, why were people so adamant that it was a law enforcement officer unless that equals your four? Um, this Richard Weeks guy, I think you can rule out and be like, that dude didn't do shit. He wrote some bad
The
fucking
one
checks. okay,
Oh,
y'all
yeah,
are
no,
stretching
come on,
on that.
no. You don't escalate from writing a bad check to going murdering women. I mean, huge
No, I
jump
feel
there,
like
big
that's
leap.
a long
Yeah,
stretch.
that's a big
But then
leap.
I wonder because we go back to the car being left and all these things. I think because remember this same law enforcement officer came through our drive-through every single day. Most law enforcement officers don't just get you out of the car for a speeding ticket or a tail light. However, if you knew the officer and he's like, "Hey, get out, give me a hug."
Mhm. Right. Yeah.
So I think that
Um
she knew him. I think that
And
she
it's a
knew who
very
he
good
was.
possibility. Okay, with that said, going back to my initial theory, she's like, "Oh crap, I'm getting pulled over. Yes, I'm yards away from my driveway. I could pull in, but I'm a young person and oh my god, mom and dad might find out. So let me pull my driver's license out, stop the car right here." He gets out. She's like, "Oh, it's just so and so." And
Oh yeah,
has
I
her
know who
driver's
it's
license,
not.
and he's like, "Hey, girl, you were going a little fast, but come on, give me a hug." And she's like, "Sure." Engine still
No
running,
big
jumps out.
deal.
He snatches her, puts her in the car, and drives off. So,
And guess what? You'd be none the what. So how did you stop her
you have
from
a
screaming?
comment. You have a
I
comment
believe
from one of your fans. That mic and them headphones. Cute.
mwah, chef's kiss. She knows me. That is my best friend in the entire world. She's one of my biggest
Aw,
supporters. I love her.
cute.
Huge shout out to her. But no, so here's another thought that went through my head. Remember, they said that she had this hit to the left side of her head. You need to shut her up. If you're trying to slam her in a trunk or put her in the back seat of a car against her will, you're going to knock her over the head. You got to. I mean,
Mhm.
you
Or
had to
like, what is
have
the whole big 80s thing, chloroform, where they put the thing over your
yeah, like
mouth?
ether or chloroform,
Yeah,
But the thing
something.
is like, I don't think that chloroform, even though I know it was like used, I don't think it was super like, you couldn't go to
Probably not, yeah.
TGY by
I just think he
it.
would have had to, have done something. Yeah, you have another comment? Your fans are loving
Thanks,
your headphones.
thanks, Tony. Look, they're so me, y'all. They really are.
Alright.
But they know me so well.
Cute.
They're like, she has on a pink shirt today, and everybody's probably losing their mind because I'm on color.
That's cute.
But so it's absolutely insanity to me on all of that because you had to have hit her over the head. You had to chloroform her or something. There's something that you did to subdue to
Ah,
get her either in the trunk or the back seat. Because
yeah.
obviously you didn't just give her a hug and then pick up a person and just sling them in there.
No.
They
I
didn't
also
fight. They didn't
feel
scream. There's no struggle.
right.
Or, 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 or
Mhm.
did he say, "I'm going to put you in cuffs, da 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 da, put you in the back of a patrol car.
Very
You're not
possible,
gonna
like
fight and struggle being arrested." Now she's
exactly.
scared. She doesn't know why she's being arrested. She's like, I might have been going 3 miles over the speed limit. Holy shit.
But she's
But
young,
now,
so she's not aware of, like, all the rules, and she's young, nervous, whatnot. Yeah.
exactly. So it's like, it makes sense that all these different things could possibly be scenarios. But I'm leaning towards this one law enforcement officer, and there's four dudes in this car. I'm thinking, I really have this thought in my head. Mr. McLean has something to do with this. I believe that. But
Mm,
I believe because if you dig deeper, he does have ties to Scott County and Bolivar County and Lee County. And if you dig into all of his past, I mean, this man's got a rap sheet longer than the I-55 corridor. However,
oh,
I believe because he does have ties to all these counties and this area, and he knows that area, and he had family that lived in the Raymond area, which would be out around Bolton. I'm really believing that we can find our four. And I believe that the reason that the young blue-eyed boy in the backseat of that car offed himself is because he knew what they did. I don't think he did it,
exactly.
but I think that
It's the
he
guilt,
knew.
and he couldn't deal with it. Yeah.
And
It's
I'm
yeah,
sorry, but I believe that those are your four. And I believe there were four. I'm
I
100%
agree.
because you,
I agree. And
there's
it very
two
well could have been
scenarios.
like a sexual deviant ring where these guys are like, "Hey, let's go out and get girls and we'll just dump their bodies
I
somewhere
think
afterwards."
exactly. And what I think, this is just my thought, and this is what it came up with when I was like, how would, you take one person, he's a law enforcement officer, woo, 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 blue lights, arrests them, puts them in the car, drives them to an undisclosed location. Him and his buddies choo choo on them. They dump the body. different locations, different places, whatever, you're not looked at because you don't have ties to these other people. And nobody knows that you and your buddies are going to deer camp and doing X, Y, and Z. And nobody's none the wiser. And I think that is why there is a gag order that has been issued on a murder case, is because this particular law enforcement officer has extremely deep ties to
Mhm.
judges.
Agreed.
His family is
Agreed.
like all involved. And
Mm.
I don't care what anyone says, but that man had his hands in this shit. I don't care what anybody says.
I
I've read
agree.
enough
I
about
agree
this guy.
because someone that has gone missing, a young woman has gone missing, um, possibly just real suspicious circumstances, and there's a gag order on it. That's bizarre. It's not as if she's a celebrity. She's just a small town girl. They're, I mean, they're hindering the progress of her being found
Exactly.
by putting a
And I'm
gag
going to
order on
tell
the
you what,
case.
girl, look, this will be another one. I'm going to tell you, we're probably going to end up with a part two in this because I still
That
have
sounds good to me.
hundreds
There's
of
so much more,
pages
I know.
to.
I went down the rabbit hole on this one too. It was like, "What the hell?" Late last
It's
night,
a
I'm
lot.
all researching stuff on my phone in the dark, like,
I
"What the hell
know.
is that?" You know? So, yeah, no, I get it.
Because there's so
Mhm.
much. But I will tell you this much. We could sit here for the next 9 hours
Um,
going over scenarios or questions. And girl, we're still going to have more questions and more
right.
questions and more questions.
I have a statement here from, Jimmy Castle. So, I don't know if you've been seeing, the Uncle Jay is after me because I did in fact kidnap Jimmy Castle. I kidnapped him from the airport. I'm just
Did
gonna
you?
admit it
I
to
was
you.
wondering why I haven't
I
heard
know
from.
I was contemplating it, and then I thought, my show just isn't doing good enough. So the Lost Common Sense show. So I was like, screw it. I'm gonna kidnap Jimmy, and
I
they're gonna
agree.
make
I
me
like it.
podcast famous. And if I'm able to keep him, I'll send him over to you. Like, we'll just pass him around until they make us famous.
Hell yes. And he
Yeah.
could be a good
But
true crime uncle.
watch out for that Mr. J guy. Like, I roll, Mr. J, I roll. Okay. He doesn't scare me. He's making all these threats and stuff. So whatever.
Oh
But yeah,
God.
Jimmy's tied up in my basement. Look, here we go. He's I don't know
It started.
how he's
Hey, look, I'm not
telepathically
gonna lie.
sending these messages.
My husband is literally like, y'all, if you can see this, my husband is like over here doing the starving, famish. This man ain't
Oh,
never gonna starve a day in his
he's
house.
hungry.
He's
He's
having
gonna
a these men cannot stop. If you send Jimmy, I'll send them on a play date, okay?
Yeah, right. So I think we probably should do a part 2 on this and table it. But, for now,
Yeah,
I'm gonna go, give Jimmy some bread and water in my basement, and you should feed your husband a very
I
hearty meal.
know. A hard
And,
job.
of course, Jimmy is or somebody is saying, "Grant will never starve as long as you're in the kitchen."
Joni knows. All right, girl. Look, I want to give
Alright,
another shout out
so
to you. Thank you
let
so much
let
for being here.
you're
Um,
welcome.
I am
So do
honored that you came on. I'm so
yes.
thankful to have you here, and huge shout
Mhm.
out to my wonderful co-host who couldn't
I'm
be
gonna
with us
be
to this
Yeah, I'm
day.
gonna
But
be
as
sharing
many
all of
times
this.
as I can get this girl, she's gonna be here with
Mhm.
us.
Definitely, I'll come on anytime. I'm gonna share this to everybody, and just any of your fans, check out my audio podcast over on Spotify,
Yes,
Unexplained Realms.
unexplained realms.
We're not
This,
quite
this,
true crime, but we talk about aliens and cryptids and some true crime, anything that's unexplained. I also have a podcast here on, Antisocial. It's the Lost Common Sense podcast. So, but I'm
awesome.
definitely
Well,
willing
just
to
give
come
it
back.
a
So,
awesome. Thank you so much, girl. And once again, I'm Nikki here at True Cocktails and Crimes. Our drink of the afternoon was the Georgia Firefly. I'm going to go and tell you I've had like 2 or 3 of these things, and they are going down smooth.
I'll
So
have to try
remember,
it.
next time you want to try it, 3 ounces Tito's vodka, 3 ounces of sweet tea of your choice, homemade or store bought, and 3 ounces of lemonade. Serve over ice and indulge. I hope you've enjoyed our cocktail hour. We'll see you soon next week with another
Bye.
case.
Bye bye.